Saturday, October 15, 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the News Over For You television. J-Photo, my name. Let's kick off in West Africa, precisely in Burkina Faso, to say that National Forum names coup leader Traoré president of the transition. If they were suspended, it didn't last for long. A few hours after the National Forum kicked off in Burkina Faso Friday, coup leader Captain Traoré was unanimously named president of the transition. He was named by the some 300 people representing political parties, civil society, religious groups, and the security forces who gathered in Ouagadougou to chart the transition. The representative also adopted Article 4 of the Charter, stressing that the term of the president of the transition will end once the leader elected after 2024 presidential race will be sworn in. The article adds that the president of the transition is not eligible for the presidential, legislative, and municipal election that will be organized to end the transition. He had served as head of the military power since September 30, when he hosted Colonel Damiba. In West Africa, still in West Africa, precisely in Mali, we talk about plans afoot to military police force against a new bill praise. The national police will once again become a military body and undergo the same training if a new bill is approved by the National Transitional Council. The police and the military will have the same training, the same bonus, and will have the same advantages. The only difference is that the police and civil protection agents will remain under the Ministry of Security and the military will remain under the Ministry of Defense, said Abubakar Siddiq Fumba, member of the National Transition Council. The bill will allow the military rights protect areas liberated by the army, but according to the opposition leader Amadou, the police and civil protection have mission over and above the defense at the same territorial area. We come back now into the Africa at large. We talk about the countries divided over the UN vote against Russia. 26 African countries voted in favor of the resolution rejecting Moscow's controversial referenda in 4 Ukrainian regions. 19 others abstained. More details in the following report. Republic, Ethiopia, the Republic of Congo, South Africa, Sudan, Uganda, and Zimbabwe were among the African countries that abstained. Eritrea, which had previously voted to reject a UN resolution condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine, also abstained. 3 of these countries hosted Russian diplomatic chief Sergei Lavrov during his tour of the region in July. Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, and Sao Tome were absent from the assembly. The General Assembly of the 193 member states had met in an emergency meeting. It adopted the resolution with 143 votes in favor, with 5 countries against and 35 abstaining, including China, India, Pakistan, and South Africa, despite diplomatic efforts by the United States. The 5 states that vote against were Russia, Belarus, Syria, North Korea, and Nicaragua. Earlier this month, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba toured Africa in an effort to counter Russia's apparent hold on the continent. The goal was to persuade leaders to support Kiev. He was forced to cut his visit short after Moscow intensified its bombing of Ukraine. While in Chad, in less than 48 hours, the transitional government appointed veteran opposition figure Saleh Kebzabou to head an interim administration of national union. He would replace Albert Pahimi Padek, who resigned to pave way for a new government. Jix Nabise reports.
Former journalist Kebzabou, 75 years of age, ran 4 times for the presidency against Déby's father, Idriss Déby Itno, who was killed during an operation against rebels in April 2021 and was succeeded by a military government headed by his son, a 38-year-old 5-star general. The transitional council had originally declared it would restore civilian rule After 18 months in power, and Deby had at first promised he would not take part in the future elections. But as the 18-month period neared, the nationwide forum staged by Deby reset the clock, pushing back elections onto October 2024. Last weekend, it approved that new 24-month time frame for holding elections, named Deby transitional president for the interim, and declared he could run for the post. Deby was sworn in on Monday for a new phase of the transition, vowing to name a government of national union within days. The outgoing premier was a 55-year-old political veteran, Albert Payimi Padaki, who had served for 18 months and had also been Prime Minister under Deby's father, formally resigned on Tuesday alongside his government.
Thank you, Dix Nabise, for this report that brings us to Sudan to talk about the rebel groups operating from Sudan Nuba Mountains has handed over 9 prisoners of war to Khartoum authorities. The transfer was done on Thursday after neighboring South Sudan's mediation potentially boosts chances for the two sides to reach a final and permanent accord. Once more, report.
A rebel group operating in from Sudan's Nuba Mountains has handed over 9 prisoners of war to Khartoum authorities. The transfer was done on Thursday after neighboring South Sudan's mediation potentially boosted chances for the two sides to reach a final and permanent accord. The 9 men who were being in captivity of Sudan's People Liberation Movement North, the SPLMN, were handed over to Sudan's ambassador in South Sudan, Jamal Malik, in South Sudan's capital, Juba. They were captured last month after heavy battles in Sudan's South Kordofan province and were being released on humanitarian grounds to return to their families. Aman Aman, the movement's Secretary General, told a news conference in Juba. Sudan's ambassador Jamal Malik told the news conference in Khartoum welcomed the handover of the prisoners, although he said they were not members of South Sudan's armed forces. Sudan's government has in recent years been pursuing efforts to reach accords with rebel groups across the country and end decades of conflict that have displaced millions of people and killed hundreds of thousands. According to reports, some rebels from the country's south and from the troubled western region of Darfur have already signed agreements to cease hostilities. But the faction of Sudan's People Liberation Movement North, led by Abdulaziz Al-Hilu, who has control over significant forces and territory from his stronghold in South Kordofan, has held out. Talks between the rebel and Khartoum, mediated by South Sudan, have so far failed to yield final accords, although progress has been made. The handover of the captive by the movement rebel group signals a good intention from the rebels to continue to engage in talks, said Tut Galaluk Manime, South Sudan's presidential advisor on security affairs, who is heading the mediation team.
We now move away to Nigeria to talk about university lecturers return to work after 8-month strike. A strike by university lecturers in Nigeria, which shut down universities for 8 months, was called off on Friday following a court ruling and the intervention of leading figures, including the parliament speaker. Union leaders say their demands over pay, welfare and crumbling facilities have not been addressed, but students are happy to be returning to the classroom. Ahmed Dinguli Muhammad is a student at the Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, Kaduna State, and said, "I sincerely feel very happy that the federal government and ASU have been able to come into negotiation terms to call off the strike." We now close this edition of the news. We talk about health, and it is in Uganda. The World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, during a virtual meeting, said a clinical trial meeting set of vaccines that could potentially combat the Sudan strain of Ebola, driving an outbreak in Uganda, could start within weeks. Once more, Jix Nabise, give us the details.
Africa can now see light at the end of a tunnel in the fight against Ebola. World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said a clinical trial of vaccines potentially combat the Sudan strain of Ebola, driving an outbreak in Uganda that could start within weeks. The East African country declared an outbreak of Ebola on the 20th of September and said infections were being caused by the Sudan strain. So far, Uganda's health ministry has confirmed a total of 54 Ebola cases and 19 deaths, including health workers. There have been worries the spread of the infection in the country could be difficult to contain since there is no vaccine of the strain. For now, the infections are concentrated in a cluster of 5 districts in central Uganda. In a virtual address to a meeting of Africa regional health officials in Uganda's capital Kampala, Tedros said several vaccines are currently being developed that could deal with the Sudan strain. 2 of those vaccines could be put in clinical trial in Uganda in the coming weeks pending regulatory and other approvals from the Ugandan government, he said. Our primary goal now is to rapidly control and contain its outbreak to protect neighboring districts as well as neighboring countries, explained Tedros. Tedros did not give details of the vaccine due for trial, including the names or which firm developed them. Ebola, a hemorrhagic fever, mainly spread through contact with bodily fluids of an infected person. Symptoms of this viral disease include intense weakness, muscle pain, headaches, and a sore throat, vomiting, diarrhea, and rashes, amongst others. Although it has no vaccine, the WHO has previously said the Sudan strain is less transmissible and has shown lesser fatality rate in previous outbreaks than Ebola Zaire.
On that, we put a close to this edition of the news over for you television. Thanks for your kind attention.